I just want to say a quick word, and I want to thank, in particular, our host. And the point is that the Organization of Iranian American Communities, who have so many friends in the United States Senate and House, are the true Iranian Americans. They have been very quiet for a long time, in part because their relatives died in the prisons of Iran fighting for democracy as part of an organization that was put on the terrorism list. I'm not going to bore you with the history lesson, but they should not have been on the terrorism list, and they were never put on the list for terrorism. They were put on the list as a quid pro quo to the regime in Iran. They're off the list now. I also want to say a word about the National Council of Resistance of Iran, led by its president-elect, Maryam Rajavi. You'll hear a lot of things in the media about this group and about Mrs. Rajavi. Be very careful what you read. I want to tell you about why I became so intrigued by the National Council of Resistance. The first time I heard Mrs. Rajavi was in Paris in 2011, 8 years ago, at a rally with tens of thousands, perhaps over 100,000 people in a massive hall north of Paris. And I thought, I was just examining, who is this person? What is this group? A lot of negative things are said about them in Washington, and they're on the terrorism list at the time. This is what she said. I'm going to read from her remarks, and you tell me if this is the statement of a power-hungry, non-democratic dictator. Quote, this is Madame Rajavi in 2011, "Our goal is to establish a free and democratic republic based on the separation of church and state, gender equality, and with emphasis on women's equal participation in political leadership. We want a non-nuclear Iran. Our platform could be summed up in 3 words: freedom, equality, and the supremacy of the people's vote. This has been our ideal from the outset. We are not fighting and making sacrifices to be able to grab onto power. We have not even set our sights on sharing power and the ability to govern. Our biggest mission is the establishment of the people's sovereignty and democracy. We would be content to remain in opposition and feel honored to sacrifice ourselves for the sake of giving the Iranian people the ability to choose freely." Unquote. And how powerful those words are today when the Iranian people are rising up and asking for exactly that. And my message to you is, as someone who has tried to research for the truth of this story, is to be very careful. Because in Washington today, I'm not sure, in fact I am sure, we're not getting the straight story. We are not getting the truth about our speakers, about the NCRI, about the MEK, and about the regime. We're not getting the right story. Look around you. What is everyone talking about in terms of foreign intelligence? It's Russia. If anyone ever met with a Russian, they have to go get deposed, they have to tell the whole story, they have to testify, they may have to go to court. Russia, 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 Russia. China is also a major intelligence target. Is anybody investigating Iran? Does anyone in the room believe for a moment that the mullahs in Tehran don't care how we think here in Washington? We, the strongest country on earth, we who are setting the tone of an international campaign to cut off oil exports from Iran? Obviously, they care a lot. And what I've been looking into is the reality that they have a lot of influence in this town. And I'd like it to be represented. I'd like it to be investigated. I've testified a few times calling for a counterintelligence investigation of Iran's influence campaign. I don't think it's happened yet. But let me just say a word about the distinguished speakers you heard. General Jones, Senator Lieberman, Governor Ridge. Not only do they know what they're talking about, but all of them and many other distinguished Americans have been accused of doing something very disrespectful. Well, flying over to Europe, take a paycheck, read something off of a card and fly home. That's what Washington establishment people want you to believe, because they're afraid of the truth. The truth is that these gentlemen and a number of other of the most distinguished senior leaders of this country have spent countless hours, days, travels on their own nickel, talking to each other, emailing each other, studying these issues, talking with the resistance, learning about the stories of who died in the jails of Iran by standing up for their own inalienable rights. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. Those aren't just American rights. Those were given to be from our Creator as inalienable rights. And so every human being naturally thinks that they should be free to live. But they're not free to live in Iran, and thousands, as Governor Ridge pointed out, have been executed. And guess what? They have brothers, sisters, spouses, children, cousins, friends. That's the OIAC. That's the NCRI. And they come from all over the world, at least once a year, to sit and stand together and show the world that there is a huge population of people who not only have been victimized by tyranny, but who have said no and have stuck their chin out and said, we're not going to take this. For over 50 years, since the MEK was a secret student society, they have said no to tyranny, first under the Shah with his brutal Shabak secret service, and then under the Ayatollahs. So there's a lot of history here that I am cautioning you. You're not going to hear it from the establishment, my friends in the establishment in Washington. And one reason, I've been reading journals from 2010, 2001. What were people saying about Iran? They were saying that journalists are sometimes pulling their punches. They don't want to say too much about the regime in Iran because they're afraid they won't get a visa. They're afraid they won't get that interview with Foreign Minister Zarif, the charmer. They're afraid they'll never get to see President Rouhani and get the story and get on television. Here I am in Tehran reporting. I'm a great correspondent. The minute they say anything truthful about the NCRI, no more visa, no more interview. Believe me, there's a blacklist. And that influences what we're hearing. I want to explain to the staff members in the room and to anyone who's listening some realities that underpin this entire issue. And I hope that you look into it and come to realize the same things yourself. The Ayatollahs who took over in 1979, when Khomeini arrived in Iran, he was welcomed as an authentic national figure. He never told anyone he was going to have a dictatorship until after he got there. And when he did, he circulated a document, a constitution, that made himself a divine figure, the embodiment of the 12th Imam. He was in occultation, and until he appeared on earth, the supreme leader embodied the 12th Imam of the Prophet, which gave him divine power to say, you must hang, you must be jailed, we will take this money, we will keep the oil revenues, we will shoot these people, anything he wanted. And that's how it started. Masoud Rajavi was a candidate for president. He's the only person who was disqualified. Why? One reason, and this is the key to the whole thing. The NCRI are Muslims. You've seen the beautifully covered women. You've seen proper people all around the world, in Paris and Albania, in the United States. They're Muslims. And they're Muslims with a message, which is, you can be a good Muslim, and you can be a fully developed citizen. You can be a PhD. You can be a woman who runs for office and leads. You can be anything you want, which goes against Khomeini's constitution, which is entirely male-dominated and has very strong restrictions on women, among many other things. So there's no democracy. Women are repressed. This goes entirely against the NCRI and the MEK's concept of Islam. They're afraid of the NCRI on religious grounds. I want you to just internalize that fact. Secondly, they stole the revolution. It was never their revolution. It was the people of Iran. There were huge electoral processes. There were political campaigns. There were tens of thousands of people who showed up in stadiums to talk about freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom to vote. And those rallies were harassed by the street toughs of the mullahs. They're Hezbollahi, they're Basij. And they called out the whole country to the streets in June of 1981, 500,000 people in Tehran, And what did Khomeini do? He was just like the Shah. He was about to lose it all, and they opened up their guns, and they shot their way to power. That's why the mullahs are illegitimate. They have no basis for being in power except at the point of a gun. I've been spinning off a few facts for you. I'm going to challenge our media friends and our staffers from the Congress with one more fact. There are 4 major court cases that the National Council of Resistance at Iran and the MEK went to court to say we're not terrorists. They won all 4 cases: the United States, United Kingdom, European Union, and France. There was an armed struggle at one point between the two sides, for sure. But the French magistrate who ran an 8-year investigation said that at no time had this group ever conducted any act that constituted terrorism. They opposed the regime, but they had strict rules about innocent bystanders. There was no terrorism. And then I challenge you, in over 50 years of support to this group, I have yet to find a case where any member of this group was ever successfully prosecuted on a charge of terrorism in a country with rule of law and due process. It's never happened. And you think, really? Why are these people quoted all the time? And they have staff members who join the White House staff and who join the State Department staff. And yet, if you follow it closely, you find, and this person goes around the world and talks to Rouhani, talks to Zarif, writes books, tells us what opportunities we missed and how we shouldn't push it too hard with Tehran because war would be a catastrophe and we don't understand enough to be forceful with Iran. And it turns out that they've exaggerated in the past how many people actually follow that organization. And it also turns out that the person who created it can't even vote in this country because he's not an Iranian American. So, go back to your newspapers, Google all you want. You'll read about the terrorist acts that they committed, how they killed Americans, how they did all these things, how they took over the embassy. There's another history, folks, that's going to come out. And when you know the truth, you'll know that none of that happened with this group. They are absolutely innocent of that. They are instead the noble survivors of this terrible tyranny that's lasted 40 years. So we stand with you, and we wish you all a great day. Happy Nowruz. Thank you all for coming.